Good morning, everyone. I hope you are well. It's 9 o'clock, which means that it's 11 o'clock in Israel, and that means that it is a minute's silence, and therefore we will fall silent so that we can remember all those that lost their lives in the wars and in the defense of the state of Israel. So I'm going to play the siren. We're going to have 1 minute of silence starting now. You can think about all of those that gave their tomorrow for our today. Thank you for those that are still joining us. That was the minute silence as Israel fell silent. We fell silent as we recall and remember on Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Remembrance Day, and we recall all of those that made the ultimate sacrifice. And it's a feeling of tremendous gratitude that we should have today. For us, we can't feel the loss. It's not a personal loss. In Israel, of course, everyone will be going to the cemeteries, to the military cemeteries, to the civil cemeteries, to pay their respects and to mourn the loss of their brothers, their sisters, their mothers, their fathers, in some cases children, in some cases grandchildren, and it goes back generations. That is the way that the state of Israel had to be built. Regrettably, it was a heavy price and is a heavy price, and we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to them all. So I'd like, of course, to dedicate today's learning to the memory of those. Yehi Zichron Baruch, may their memory be one of blessing, as well as dedicating to the Yortzites for today, to Avram ben Chaim Bachman, to Mordechai ben Chaim Kay, to Avram ben David Slavin, to Moshe ben Yaakov Halevi Brooks. Wish them all long life. So, I want to speak about the part 2 of what we were discussing yesterday, and I think it ties in with a rather controversial message that I'd like to leave you on this Yom HaZikaron with. But we don't pull any punches here. I hope you don't mind that we sometimes are a bit controversial, but it's nothing wrong in having a respectful opinion. So, and of course, there is the chat box for you to share your views. So we spoke yesterday about the fact that Rebbe Kiva students, and good morning, everyone. We spoke yesterday about Rebbe Kiva students and the fact that they died tragically, 24,000 students, his life's work, and they died because they didn't give each other the requisite respect in terms of their opinions, in terms of them having a different perspective to their own. Now, Rebbe Kiva stood for the concept of the Ahavta l'recha kamocha. In other words, the loving one's neighbor as oneself. Now, of course, that is a concept, that is an axiom in the Torah itself. But what Rebbe Kiva did is he brought this concept to the fore. I suggested yesterday, I hypothesized that perhaps in the aftermath of this tragedy of mourning his 24,000 students, therefore he felt that it was important that the concept of loving one's neighbor as oneself is something which we bring to the fore. That was just my suggestion. But the question that I want to deal and grapple with today in the few minutes that we have is, how do we understand this concept of loving your neighbor as yourself? It's not my question. It's the question that Rav Shimon Shkop, one of the great sages of yesteryear in pre-war, he asked the question, and he asked it as follows. Friends, think about the following. If I was to say to you to love one another, you may say, listen, I like them. I feel, I feel tremendous affinity towards them. But how can we possibly be commanded, firstly, to have a feeling towards another? And how can I command an emotion? And secondly, how can we command you to love someone else the way that you love yourself? Isn't that an impossibility? Isn't that asking the unthinkable from each and every one of us? After all, Mervyn is Mervyn, Michael is Michael, Rachel is Rachel, Michael is Michael, Carol and Harry and everyone else who are joining us on Yom HaZikaron, which we've dedicated today's learning to Yom HaZikaron, to the memory of all of those that made the ultimate sacrifice for the state of Israel, for our homeland, for our country. As I keep emphasizing, it shouldn't be that there's a country called Israel and we're over here and they're over there. It's our country, and we should feel that it is our country, and we need our children and grandchildren to impress upon the next generation, good morning, pal, the idea that it is our country, and therefore we should be visiting it, we should be thinking it, we should still be supporting it. We shouldn't feel that, cut loose and, only once in a blue moon will I actually bother to visit it. It doesn't feel like I'm connected in any way. But let's go back to where we were before we went on a rant. And that is, how do I love someone else who is not me? How can I love them as myself? Love your neighbor as yourself. Shimon Scott says the question, of course, presupposes that there is a difference between somebody else and yourself. And as long as you see that somebody else as somebody else and you as the other, then, of course, it is impossible to love another the way that you love yourself, right? I am inextricably bound. I am connected. It is to my arm, my hand. If I were to bang a nail into the wall, right, putting up a mezuzah, it's the only time Jews bang nails into walls, right? And then, of course, I hit my fingers. I don't rebuke my fingers. I feel sorry for my fingers because my fingers are a part of my hand. My hand is a part of me, right? Says Reb Shimon Scott, the only way that we can truly love another person as ourselves is if we see them as ourselves. You see, a little person will see a baby starts off just recognizing. You can see this in the work of Winnicott, one of the great psychotherapists, who spoke about, that the baby cannot recognize he or she itself. It can't recognize the difference between the mother and the baby, and therefore it takes months and even a year for the self to emerge and for that child to recognize who it is. But really, what we're trying to do is to go back to that very, very infantile mindset, which is to see that there is no real difference between the mother and the child. That's what he says. The breast of the mother is the child sees as part of him or herself. And so it is that's the way Rav Shimon Scott, he says that's the only way that we can truly, truly understand and appreciate who we are, and that we are all one entity. If I see you, I expand my boundaries, my borders, not just from my head to my toe, but I see you as a part of myself. Firstly, my children, my family, right? They are as much a part of me as my head or my toe, right? And then a greater person can even expand it further, and they can see that their neighbor, their cousin, their member of their shul, whoever it is, that we're all one. We're all one entity. That's what being part of the Jewish people is. And I'm going to cut to the chase. We know in relation to Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, when he lay down to have the dream about exile. So he started off with having 12 stones representing the 12 tribes around his head, and then at the end of the dream, he noticed when he got up from that dream and great prophecy of exile, about which we are in, he recognized that those 12 stones had become one stone. And the Medrash tells us that, in fact, the 12 stones were squabbling. Each one wanted to be under the head of the righteous person, of the tzaddik, of Jacob. And at the end of it, therefore, God made them into one stone so that they wouldn't fight. And the question that I think it was the Chidah, the Maharal, I can't remember who, says is, why should that solve the problem? If this is the pillar of Jacob, this is the rock, right? They've made it into one. The head of Jacob was only resting on one place, one part of the rock. So why didn't they still all fight? And the answer is that once they had became one, once those individual 12 stones had become one, then they felt that they were inextricably bound. They were all one. And therefore it didn't make a difference which part of the stone Jacob's head was resting on. They all felt connected. They all felt that Jacob was resting on them because they were all one. And to conclude with a beautiful story of Ari Levin, we know that in terms of our relationships of feeling one, the ultimate expression is with a spouse, all right? And that's perhaps the most challenging area. So Aryeh Levin, who was one of the great sages and the rabbi of Palestine before the state of Israel, and had to try to spend many every waking moment trying to soothe the nation in the face of the British mandate and all the challenges and atrocities. Anyway, so he went to the doctor with his wife, and his wife had a problem. And he said to the doctor, listen to these words, friends, my wife's arm is hurting us. Without missing a beat, my wife's arm is hurting us. That is ultimately, friends, where we are meant to be, where we are meant to get to, that we feel inextricably bound, be it to our spouse, be it to our friend, be it to our children, be it to our neighbor, everyone. Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh, all of Israel, we are all bound to each other. We're a collective entity. And therefore, perhaps, and here's the controversial part, this is the greatest thing. This will be the greatest achievement, more than all the innovation and the great things that Israel as a country has done. And I am one of its greatest ambassadors, and I'm so proud of the state of Israel. But at the same time, I get so irritated and upset, and it pains me greatly when I see Jew fighting Jew. It can't be that we go into a fifth election, a sixth election. I've lost count how many elections with Bibi as prime minister, and yet at the end of it, nobody has put at the top of their manifesto. Nobody has put at the top of their manifesto, I want to unite Israel. That's what's most important to me. I want to have one, Am Echad, one people. That is what the state of Israel needs to do in the coming year, and that is the greatest challenge, and that will be the greatest achievement. Please God, we should all be blessed to have peace and tranquility in the state of Israel and as the Jewish people and the world at large. We'll conclude. I apologize again, we are running late, and I have another back-to-back meeting at 9:15, which I'm already late for in stoppage time. So we will conclude with the memorial prayer. Adon Elamim Zachoris Nishmois Avram ben Chaim Bachman, Mordechai ben Chaim K, Avram ben David Slavin, Moshe ben Yaakov Halevi Brooks, Chanabas Moshe, Etaban Moshe Hillman, Shalchu Lilamam Began Aiden Taimanu Chosam Lachim Elarachamim Yatrim Seitakana Pablo Lambim. ויצור בזכית שלושם ונוי נחלסם ינוחו בשלום משכבם ונאמר אמן. רפואה שלמה משבח אבותינו ומצווה יעקב משה נדב ושלמה יברך רפס החיים בעבור שנו משפלים בעבורם בזכות הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא רחם עליהם לחם לפוסם וישלח להם רפואה שלמה לשמיים לכל עברים בסוף שח ישראל רפואה הנפש רפואה הגוף השבוע זמן קרב ונאמר אמן. Now Rachel just responded amen, I presume, to the message about unity in Israel between right and left and black and white. But let me tell you, friends, I'm not just pointing a finger. Whenever you point a finger in one direction, you're pointing three fingers at yourself. Okay, three fingers at yourself. And therefore, we also have to ask a question about ourselves and our own community. Okay, how, are we really one? Are we really doing everything to unite the whole community? Rabbi Liss, I'm just on Facebook with the community. I'll be 1 minute. Okay, so the whole idea is that we also have to make an extra effort in the coming year to have true achdus, to have true unity. And yeah, there are things that are going to annoy us tremendously about the right, about the left, about the black hats, about the white hats, about no hats, about the gay community, the non-gay community, the rich, the poor. but we are one community. And the downfall of Israel and of the Jewish people is not from the outside. It's when we shoot ourselves in the foot. It's when we stab ourselves in the back. We have to learn the lesson. We are stronger together. Oh, focus on what we have in common rather than focusing on our differences. And with that, I'll conclude, wishing you all a good day. And we look forward to seeing you tonight, 8 p.m. on the KLBD Roadshow. 2 hampers to be won. It'll be fantastic. And then tomorrow night, we'll celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut. All the very best.